Some Hollywood stories sound too strange to be true. A superstar turns down a movie that becomes a classic. A director almost casts someone completely different. A single phone call changes cinema forever. But every once in a while you find a story so bizarre that even Hollywood couldn't have written it any better. Imagine standing on the edge of the role that would define a generation, only to lose it because of a television contract. Then imagine discovering you never actually had to lose it at all. And while the actor who replaced you becomes one of the biggest movie stars in history, you're standing in your own house trying to stop a burst water pipe. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. This is Hollyweird Stories. By the late 1970s, Steven Spielberg was already one of Hollywood's hottest directors. George Lucas had just changed filmmaking forever with Star Wars. Together, the two friends dreamed of making the kind of Saturday afternoon adventure serials they had loved as kids. Stories filled with hidden temples, ancient treasures, dangerous villains, impossible escapes, and a fearless archaeologist who always seemed to get himself into trouble. That archaeologist would become Indiana Jones. The fedora, the leather jacket, the bullwhip, the crooked grin. One of the most recognizable movie heroes of all time. But before audiences ever heard John Williams' unforgettable theme, before the giant boulder rolled through that Peruvian temple, before Harrison Ford ever cracked a whip, there was another man wearing the hat. His name was Tom Selleck. Today it's almost impossible to picture anyone else as Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. The role made him an icon. But in 1980, that wasn't the obvious choice. In fact, George Lucas was initially hesitant to cast Ford at all. Ford had already become Han Solo in Star Wars, and Lucas worried audiences would simply see Han wearing a different costume. He wanted someone fresh, someone audiences hadn't already associated with another blockbuster. Enter Tom Selleck. Tall, athletic, naturally funny, confident without trying too hard. He had exactly the rugged charm Spielberg imagined. Selleck wasn't a newcomer. He'd spent nearly a decade grinding through Hollywood. Commercials, guest appearances, small television parts, westerns, game shows, pilots that never went anywhere. Like so many actors, he'd experienced years of hearing the word no. Hollywood seemed convinced that he was almost a leading man, but never quite. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. Actually, everything changed twice. Selleck auditioned for Raiders of the Lost Ark. By every account, he impressed everyone involved. His screen tests still exist today, and watching them is almost surreal. He's wearing Indy's leather jacket. He's delivering the dialogue. He's even moving with that relaxed confidence audiences would later associate with Harrison Ford. Spielberg loved him. Lucas approved him. The role was essentially his. For one glorious moment, Tom Selleck was Indiana Jones. Or at least, he thought he was. At almost the exact same time, another opportunity appeared. CBS had picked up a detective series set in Hawaii. The show centered on a laid-back private investigator living in paradise, driving a Ferrari, solving crimes, and somehow making Hawaiian shirts look impossibly cool. The series was called Magnum P.I. Selleck had signed a contract with CBS before Raiders officially moved into production. It seemed like a routine television agreement. Nobody imagined it would collide head-on with one of the biggest movies ever made. When Spielberg asked CBS if Selleck could leave temporarily to shoot the film, the answer was immediate: no. Not maybe, not if scheduling worked out, just no. Network executives believed Magnum P.I. was going to be a major investment. They wanted their leading man available, no exceptions. Spielberg tried, Lucas tried, producers negotiated. Everyone hoped for a compromise. But contracts, especially in Hollywood, can become iron cages. Tom Selleck had to walk away from Indiana Jones. Not because he didn't want the role, not because he wasn't good enough, Not because someone else gave a better audition. He lost it because of paperwork. Now imagine being Harrison Ford. One day you're told another actor has the job, the next day your phone rings. Suddenly you're flying to England, learning to use a bullwhip, running from giant boulders, battling Nazis, and unknowingly stepping into movie history. Ford famously filmed many of his own stunts. He bruised ribs, pulled muscles, spent weeks covered in dirt, sweat, and fake blood. It wasn't glamorous, it was exhausting. But every miserable day on set was building a legend. Meanwhile, Tom Selleck waited. Then fate played what might be Hollywood's cruelest practical joke. Only weeks after CBS refused to release him, production on Magnum PI stopped completely. A writer's strike shut the series down. For 6 months. 6 entire months. The very schedule CBS had insisted was too important to interrupt no longer existed. Selleck suddenly had nothing to film, nothing to rehearse, nothing to report to. While Harrison Ford was making Raiders of the Lost Ark, Tom Selleck was sitting at home. He actually could have made the movie after all, if only the timing had been slightly different. It's one of those moments that makes you wonder whether fate has an incredible sense of humor, or a remarkably cruel one. But the story somehow gets even stranger, because while Harrison Ford was dodging arrows in ancient temples, Tom Selleck was fighting a completely different kind of disaster. A plumbing disaster. Selleck had recently purchased a home on Oahu, Hawaii. The islands would soon become home to Magnum PI, making the move practical as well as exciting. Like anyone settling into a new house, there were projects to finish, repairs to make, boxes to unpack. Then, everything went sideways. A water line burst. Suddenly, his dream home became an emergency. Water poured through the house. Instead of memorizing adventure dialogue, he was hunting for shutoff valves. Instead of swinging from ropes, he was wrestling with plumbing. Instead of escaping ancient booby traps, he was trying to keep his furniture from floating away. It's almost impossible not to laugh at the contrast. Thousands of miles away, Harrison Ford is outrunning one of the greatest opening scenes in movie history. Tom Selleck is ankle-deep in water, wondering why the pipes chose today, of all days, to explode. Even if Hollywood had written it that way, critics would have called it unrealistic. Years later, Selleck recalls the story with good humor. He joked that while Ford was battling snakes and Nazis, he was battling his plumbing. It's exactly the kind of self-deprecating humor that's made people like him for decades. Because here's the remarkable thing. Tom Selleck never became bitter. He never publicly criticized Spielberg. He never blamed Harrison Ford. He never spent 40 years complaining about the role that got away. Instead, he simply moved on. And maybe that's why everything worked out. Because when Magnum PI finally premiered later that year, America fell in love. Viewers couldn't get enough of Thomas Magnum. The Hawaiian shirts, the Detroit Tigers cap, the Ferrari 308 GTS, the tropical sunset, and of course, that legendary mustache. The show became one of television's biggest hits. It ran for 8 seasons, won awards, made Selleck one of the highest paid actors on television. He even took home an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor. Suddenly, the actor who had spent years struggling for recognition had become one of the most recognizable faces in America. Not because he was Indiana Jones, because he was Magnum. His career hardly slowed down after that. He starred alongside Ted Danson and Steve Guttenberg in 3 Men and a Baby, which became the highest-grossing film of 1987. He delivered one of the greatest modern Western performances in Quigley Down Under, a role many fans still consider one of his best. Later generations would know him as Police Commissioner Frank Reagan on Blue Bloods, where he spent more than a decade anchoring one of television's most successful dramas. Not bad for a guy who supposedly missed his chance. Of course, movie fans still can't resist asking the question, what if? What if CBS had simply said yes? What if the writer's strike had happened 2 weeks sooner? Would Tom Selleck have become Indiana Jones forever? Would Harrison Ford have remained primarily Han Solo? Would Raiders of the Lost Ark have felt completely different? Would the sequels even exist in the same form? Nobody knows. And that's part of what makes Hollywood history so fascinating. Entire careers, sometimes entire franchises, can pivot on a scheduling conflict. Tom Selleck has admitted he occasionally thinks about it. How could he not? But he also said he doesn't regret the path his life took, because missing Indiana Jones gave him something else. A role that became uniquely his, a career millions of actors would envy, and perhaps most importantly, a life that unfolded exactly as it was supposed to. It's a reminder that sometimes the opportunity you lose makes room for the opportunity you're meant to have, even if you can't see it at the time. So the next time you watch Harrison Ford outrun the giant boulder or crack the whip in some forgotten temple, remember this. Somewhere in another version of Hollywood history, that's Tom Selleck wearing the fedora. But in the version we actually got, he was probably standing in Hawaii, holding a pipe wrench, trying desperately to stop water from pouring through his house. Because sometimes the greatest Hollywood adventures don't happen on a movie set. Sometimes they happen in your basement. And somehow, that might be the most Hollyweird story of all. This is Hollyweird Stories.
Special thank you to Hollyweird Shop for making this episode possible.
Check out Hollyweird.shop. They've got the perfect items for the true movie fan. Dare to be different and unleash your weird. Hollyweird.shop unveils new designs every week and is now offering great shipping deals. Stand out, creep out, and wear your weird. Shop now at Hollyweird.shop.